Good. Okay. You want some water? Shall I fan you a little bit?
Please.
You're great.
Yes. Welcome to the Anita Strode Food Laboratory at the University of Guelph. And with us we have our special guest, Chef Bashir Munye, an educator and advocate for food. I am Kimberly Thomas-Francois, postdoctoral researcher at the University of Guelph, the School of Hospitality, Food and Tourism Management.
And I am Abdul-Rahim Abdulai, a PhD candidate and an area food scholar at the Department of Geography, Environment and Geomatics here at the University of Guelph. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge the lands and people of where we work and live, as the University of Guelph resides on the ancestral lands of the Atawadran people and the treaty lands and territory of the Mississauga of the Credit. Today, these gathering places are home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, and we offer our respect to them as our indigenous neighbors. Acknowledging them reminds us of the important connection to these lands and the ancestors where we learn and work.
Today's event in Black History Month, we launched the Deep Dishes Dialogue, a new event series designed to showcase chefs and food experts diving into impactful subjects. It is brought to us by Arrow Food Institute in partnership with the Gordon S. Lang School of Business and Economics at the University of Guelph, Canada's food university.
We are excited to have Bashir join us for the inaugural event. Bashir is a culinary professor at George Brown College, food consultant, recipe developer, and academic researcher. He is the founder of the acclaimed Nomadic Comfort Food cooking series, and is a sought-after contributor for both publications and televisions, including being a regular on the popular program, The Social. Bashir is a well-respected culinarian and was named in the Globe and Mail's list of Canada's next star chefs for 2020.
Welcome, Chef Bashir. I know we have already introduced you, but please tell us a bit of your journey and share with us what you're cooking today.
Well, after such a wonderful introduction from Abdul-Rahim, I'm blushing a little bit. I didn't know that I had so many accolades. So I'm going to introduce myself in my own indigenous language, which is Somali. So Maga Edu Hawaii, Bashir Abdul West Munye, Wilkie Hariyo Bashir, which basically means my name is Bashir Abdul West Munye, and I say son of Lul Bashir. You know, I come from a culture of being patriarchal, and in those DNA, nowadays, while we're speaking about diversity and equity and inclusion, I think I really want to take a moment to pause and reflect on my own experience as a privileged man, confronting many of my issues, and at the same time being able to also, for us to take a moment to reflect on what does indigeneity means to us as Black people. Many of us have been forced to migrate right here. Some of us made a choice, but all of us collectively, we are on indigenous land. So while I'm looking in this bounty of beautiful ingredients, I cannot not think about those ones who've been really tending the land for thousands of years prior to us. So if it's okay with you, I really want us to take like 30 seconds before cooking and really deeply think how privileged we are to be in this land. So anybody give me 30 seconds, and let's all take a moment to really set our cooking session on this land. Okay, so just 30 seconds of a personal reflection of our own privileges here. Okay, well, thank you all collectively for joining this moment of like it's, you know, really embracing being here in this particular land. Again, born in Mogadishu, Somalia, the land of poets. I lived in Italy for about 13 years of my life. Lived in the States for a couple of years, and it was a bit of a culture shock, seeing cowboys in downtown wearing strap boots and a cowboy hat. I lived there for a couple of years. Again, I ran for my life to Toronto, and I've been in Toronto for about 28 years now. Again, I was a little bit lost into the mix. I went to cooking school at the YMCA in 1996. I went to George Brown College in 2000, and it's been a one way from there on. So today I'm really excited to be here doing this cooking session, and the dishes that I'm really cooking today is part of my own childhood experience, growing up in Italy, in the Mediterranean. And although this dish is traditionally a Moroccan dish, the first time that I had it was in Tunisia, in this beautiful island called Jerba. And today we're going to be making a mushroom tagine with a beautiful combination of spices called ras al hanout. We're going to be making a roasted cauliflower with za'atar and tahini sauce, and we're going to do a fragrant couscous as well. So let's get going.
Nice.
Thank you, Bashir. So we will move on to cooking now. And you mentioned earlier that you are comfortable actually cooking and talking. That is wonderful.
I'll try my best.
So we will actually will ask you a few questions as we go along. Absolutely. And we want to also invite our audience watching to actually participate and ask some questions. You can actually do this through the YouTube comment section, or you can do it on Twitter using the hashtag Deep Dish Dialogues on Twitter.
Okay, so if it's okay with you, let me start some cooking, and then we're gonna go back. So for those of you who are just watching us, I'm just gonna share with you what's in front of me, and if you're following this particular recipe, I'm gonna go ingredients by ingredients. So for the mushroom tagine, I'm making mushroom as an option, but if you don't have these beautiful king oyster mushrooms, you can use portobello mushrooms, you can use a pumpkin, any particular vegetable that you want to, that will allow to stew within 15 to 20 minutes. So I took these beautiful king oyster mushrooms, cut them in half, and I'm not really sure if you can see them, but I actually scarred them inside. The reason that I scarred them, as I'm searing them, all the flavor will be gone inside. Mushrooms are really like a sponge. So the mushrooms are right here. I have some onions that are already cut fairly diced. I have a little bit of a garlic as well. I have oil. I have my ras al hanout, some tomato, and the most expensive spices in the world. I have a little bit of a saffron as well. So today we're gonna be indulging. So those are the ingredients for our mushroom tagine. By now you should see that I already cut my cauliflower, but as you notice, my cauliflower, I love to leave the petals. The petals is such a beautiful thing, and most of the time people, they throw away the petals. The petals not only have the same nutritional value, but at the same time provide an extra element of a flavor, and the conversation around sustainability, environmental stewardship, I think it's really important to minimize the amount of food waste. So here's my cauliflower, my olive oil is right here, and this combination of spices called the za'atar, they've been brought from a friend of mine directly from Palestine. So you can see how soft and moist the za'atar is. Smell it. Not bad, huh? There's a combination of a sumac, a dry thyme, and sesame seeds as well. And then we're gonna preheat the oven at 425 degrees, and we're gonna roast the cauliflower for approximately 15 minutes. We have the ingredients for our tahini sauce, which is tahini, toasted sesame pureed in oil. We have a cumin, we have a garlic, we have a water, and we have a lemon juice. Now, the lemon juice has already been squeezed, but I'm gonna show later on, considering the cost of living nowadays, one lemon costs $1. I wanna make sure that I can use every single part of these fruits as well. We're gonna get into there, and we have our couscous. So, couscous is right here. We have already water that is already boiling and simmering. We have currants, pistachios, green onion, parsley, salt, and so forth. Now, if there are other ingredients that you have in your fridge, like a carrot that is looking at you and it looks a little bit tired, grate that carrots and throw in there. So really trying to minimize the amount of food waste, but at the same time, own the recipe. So I'm not sure if you had this dish before, but no? How about you?
We are looking forward to it.
Okay, so if it's okay with you, I'm gonna get a few things going, and then we're gonna continue the conversation. So the first thing that I like to do with the couscous is toasting it. So I have a frying pan right here, and I really want to toast it to provide a certain flavor. Do you know what couscous is?
I know what it is, but I don't know where it comes from.
Okay, how about you?
I don't know what it is.
So couscous, it's actually durum wheat and water. This is the smallest pasta. A lot of people, they think that it's a grain, kind of like millet and so forth, but it's actually pasta. Traditionally, in Morocco, in Tunisia, and Algeria, they will have a couscousière, which is basically a double steamer. So there is a pot that has a steamer on top of it, and then they will add the couscous. And it's really labor intense. But here we tend to be a little bit busy with life, so today we are using instant couscous. So I'm just toasting it on my stove top for just like a couple minutes to allow it to become really nice and warm. I have my water that is already been boiling. Now you can add vegetable stock, you can add chicken stock or fish stock. Ontario, yours is here, so just have our own local water. I'm gonna put my couscous back into my bowl. I'm gonna move this pan right here for a second. Okay, and I'm gonna add my water. Let's move this here. Give it a little shaky. Okay, and we're gonna put a bowl to cover it. This is how simple actually the couscous is. I'm ready for any questions that you have.
Oh, I'm really amazed with what you are doing so far. So, but what we've talked about a little bit about your background, but what is really interesting to me is I really want to know when did you decide that you wanted to become a chef and what actually motivated that decision?
Yeah, you know, when I moved from the States to here in Toronto, I was fairly young. I didn't really have a sense of purpose. I was lost a little bit in the mix and kind of like moved around for a couple of years without really knowing what I was going to do with myself. And one morning, a friend of mine told me, hey, there is a fantastic program at the YMCA that I really encourage you to come and join us. So I went to this program at the YMCA and I automatically fall in love with it. I'm not sure of me because I have too many ADD and ADHD. I wasn't able to stay still for like 2 minutes in a chair. And the idea of me getting a job in a cubicle, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, it really didn't resonate with me. So I went in this kitchen and the smell and the visual appearance of all these beautiful ingredients, the ability to touch things, tasting them, it gave me an immediate satisfaction and gratification. So that was like the first time that I really connected with food above and beyond the pleasure of consuming food with friends and family on a daily basis. I always knew that I enjoyed cooking, but I really didn't see myself. Also coming from a patriarchal culture, men don't cook. Men, they get ushered away from, you know, mothers and grandmothers. Like, hey, you are a man, you don't belong in the kitchen. But I was privileged enough that my mother always loved cooking, always had me around cooking. So there was an automatic connection between myself and food. So that was my first journey. Then I went to Joe Brown College in 2000, and now 20 years later, I find myself a teacher in the same place that I started my schooling 20 years ago.
Nice.
Very interesting. So if you can still take more questions, of course, we are in Black History Month, so we would like to talk a little bit about diversity. And part of my work in the past has been about diversity within the agri-food system. So I focus more on farmers. But I really want to know, like, from your side, being a chef, what is it like being a Black chef, like in Canada, and how does your cooking actually help raise diverse voices within a multicultural environment like Canada? And like, how do you also use your cooking to bridge barriers between different races?
You know, that's a fantastic question, and I think it starts from the word that you're using, diverse. You know, the African continent have 54 countries, so you can imagine the diversity of those communities. But one thing that we have in common in the continent of Africa, we don't celebrate Black History Month. I'm not sure if you noticed, but I'm Black all year long. Okay? After February, I will still be Black. I promise to you, Abdul-Rahim. So to us who have migrated from the continent to here, it's a fairly new understanding celebrating Black History Month, because in our countries, the president is Black, the prime minister is Black, the doctor is Black. But the history of this particular, those countries in the Americas, it's built and based on enslavement, it's built and based on colonization, the genocide of indigenous people. So the experience of Black folks in North America have really overcome many of those tribulations. They are survivors of many of those horrible experiences. So now we are celebrating, there is a little bit of a bittersweetness. But myself as a chef, I'm constantly aching and yearning not only to learn about the diversity of a multi-ethnic African cuisine around the world, but at the same time, the opportunity for us to assert ourselves a little bit within a very Eurocentric space. So I'm taking the responsibility upon myself not only to learn, but also to share recipes that not only reflect on my own blackness. And again, blackness is just like my visual. And I think that as a descriptor of blackness, it's the easiest thing that oftentimes we tend to do pretty much with any race. I would like for you to introduce me more like, oh, Bashir, that tall, handsome, with a beautiful smile, look at his eyes. Oh, by the way, he's also black, you know? But I think oftentimes we use the race as an easy descriptor, and many times it comes with a predictor, right? So part of my responsibility as an educator is to share recipes, by using those recipes as a vessel to have a candid conversations. So I'm gonna start cooking the mushroom tagine. I wanna have some of this fragrance and smell to get going into the room, and then we're gonna dive in a little bit more deeper into this conversation. Okay, so for those of you who haven't made a tagine before, this is actually what a tagine is, okay? In Morocco and Tunisia, they might have them with clay. In here today, we're using this cast iron pan. Okay, so I have some lovely oil that I'm going to add in here. Now, cooking, it's all about layers of flavor. So I'm adding a generous amount of oil because the mushrooms will absorb all that oil. So I'm gonna increase this stovetop, and as soon as I can see the oil is really nice and hot, I'm going to really brown my mushrooms. So again, mushrooms, tomatoes, onion, garlic, ras el hanout, and then yeah, I think we are ready to go. So I'm gonna cook my mushroom down, and I'm gonna take a few steps. I don't really wanna overcrowd my pan. Is it a particular dish that you do in your home, Abdul-Rahim or Kimberly, that has like a stewing items?
Oh, many.
Yeah, you have a favorite one. Stewed chicken, okay, I love it.
So, can I go ahead and ask you another
Absolutely,
question?
please go ahead.
From my own research, I did look at sustainable local food supply chain in the Caribbean, in particular Grenada, and found that consumers or visitors visiting there, they particularly identified with the taste of food and the taste of the place. Are there any produce that you favor for the taste of place that you actually love to cook?
Sure. You know, here in Southern Ontario, I feel that I'm so spoiled. I did travel around the world, I mean, at least in Europe and in many African countries. But one thing that we have right here is an abundance of a vibrancy of color. If in one plate I don't see 3 different types of carrots, I don't get excited. If I don't see from heirloom tomato to cherry tomatoes to zebra tomatoes, I don't get excited anymore. So one of my favorite one nowadays, again, everything for me is driven by the season. So what does the terroir offer us? And I fall in love with the Black Creek Community Farm. And the Black Creek Community Farm, which is based in Jane and Finch in Toronto, which is the largest urban farm in Canada, I shouldn't even say discover, I was privileged enough to be surrounded by the African food basket. And at the Black Creek Community Farm, they had an experimental about 10 years ago with okra, which is one of my favorite, considering that it comes from the continent of Africa. But as a chef, you can imagine how beautiful it is to be cooking with food that is also culturally appropriate to you. Don't get me wrong, I love rutabaga, but when rutabaga and I will look each other in the eyes, there is really no connection. But when I see that okra, there was the moment of really acknowledging that my ancestors have been eating and consuming that type of a food for hundreds and hundreds of years. So I will say that here in Ontario, for me, the most exciting one is okra. We also grow here in Ontario ginger, turmeric, callaloo. So I always engage in people, listen, you can go to any grocery stores and find the very common generic vegetables. But when you have an opportunity to go to a farm, meet a farmer, have a deeper understanding of their own particular experience, and really try the food closer to the soil. Imagine how delicious a cucumber tastes when it's just been freshly harvested.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, it's like very driven by the ingredients, and my suppliers have been, for the past 10 years, really a tight connection with those farmers. which it has a major impact to the community that also serve their food. I'm gonna show you now, for those of you who are at home, look at how vibrant and beautiful those mushrooms looks like. Okay, so I took a couple of steps and I seared those mushrooms. They absorbed all that oil. Again, I'm cooking it only in one side because eventually I'm gonna braise them, right? So I'm gonna stew them off all together. I'm gonna take them out right now. And then we're gonna go with the next step as well. Cooking is all about layers of flavors. If you really enjoy cooking, you know, it gives you so much of a pleasure. I met one chef, his name is Massimo Bottura, which is like one of the most celebrated Italian chefs. And he came to George Brown College, and he signed my hat because I refused to buy his book because I didn't have the money. And he said to me that cucinare è un atto di amore. Cooking is an act of love. And I felt that it was so beautiful because most of the time we don't just cook for ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We're cooking for someone else. And
Labor of love.
Labor of love, right? So there is such a satisfaction when you're cooking for someone and someone shares with you their own experience of how your food made them feel. I think cooking is so narcissistic. So I'm gonna reduce my heat down for a second. So I cooked my mushrooms, and now I'm gonna add my onions. Okay? I reduce the heat to maybe like 2 or 3, just to make sure now that those onions, they can become really, really fragrant. Okay? So this process right here is gonna take at least about a minute. Again, lower my heat and just allow those onions to get going. Now, with the onions, we also have a little bit of a garlic. Again, everything is cooking at a low heat. A pinch of salt to break down those onions. Smells good already, right?
That's really good.
Oh, you have it.
Onions.
It's just onions. Now we're gonna add our ras al hanout. Like most cultures around the world that they use in spices, spices are not just added on top of it. You know, they're cooked in the fat so they can render the flavor and really accentuate it every single ingredients that you will be adding in there. So my onions, my garlic. The ras al hanout has a lot of really warm spices such as cinnamon, cloves, and cardamom and cumin. You know, I really, really love it. In North Africa, this is the staple for many households. In East Africa, we have what we call a garam masala. You know, Somali people have been trading with Indians for hundreds and hundreds of years. So many of the spices that you find in the Somali diet, it really comes from that relationship with those communities. Okay, so onions, garlic, cumin, everything is cooking at a low heat. It smells really lovely. Now, today we're gonna get really, really generous with some saffron. Here we go. So maybe like half that pinch of saffron.
Very spicy.
This is not gonna be spicy. This is actually like really, really aromatic. You know, it's actually very floral in smell and flavor as well. Okay, the heat will be a little bit from the spices, from the ras al hanout, because it has a black pepper and has a little bit of a cayenne as well. Oh my goodness, smells good. You can't lie. Okay,
Salivating.
so now that we have added these ingredients, we're gonna add our tomatoes. And I'm gonna increase the temperature down because now I wanna start these tomatoes to break down a little bit. Okay? I'm gonna add a little bit of water. A pinch more salt, just to kind of like provide flavor on the tomatoes as well. Add our mushrooms back in. Spread them up so they can all sit on the tomato and the water and allow them to stew together. Just push them down a little bit. Now, here we go. We just put our lid back on and off we go.
Good.
Good.
Halfway there.
Yeah, I hope I can still continue to keep myself to be able to ask more questions because I'm already looking forward to having a taste of this. The smell is good. But as you were talking, you've mentioned a lot about your experience, and I probably would like to say is that your experience has been like a journeyman, from Somalia to Italy to US to Canada. That means you've had different experiences. I'm wondering how each of these actually built into the kind of like your choice of ingredients and your cuisines, right? How do you incorporate all these experiences?
Yeah, so as I was saying, Somali cuisine, it's very diverse. We have been, we had the influence of the Indian communities, but we also had a Yemeni cuisine has influenced a lot who we are, from a religious perspective, because 99% of the Somali are Muslim people, but we also have been colonized by Italians in the southern regions, British people in the northern region, and French, which now they have their own independent state called Djibouti. So the food is like really, really vibrant and it's very diverse. At one point, you might find eating yourself pasta with beef stew, and next moment you're eating rice and goat meat with the side of a banana and hot sauce. You gotta have it. But then, you know, living in Italy, that was pretty much everything that I knew. I was 5-year-old, and I really loved the Mediterranean diet. I lived in the central part of Italy, so I had a little bit of flavors from the north, some from the south, so I was like really, really privileged. I've never had a frozen meal in my life as a child. I did experience going to farms to be able to do apple picking or persimmons, or going to with fishermen and being able to pick up seafood in Italy. So my childhood around food has always been very, very fun. In the States, there was a bit of a culture shock because I never really knew that you can go inside a grocery store and buy a hot dog with ground chili and cheese for $1. I loved it as a child. I loved it. And now I've been here for 28 years, and I didn't know how, not only how vast this country is, but also like how vibrant the food is. For you, did you knew that peanuts coming from Ghana, did you know that Ontario is the largest farming community of peanuts?
No.
Those are some of the main facts that many of us who migrated into this country, we don't really know. Specifically here in the southern parts of Ontario, the land is so beautiful. Our climate right here, it's kind of like Northern California. And actually 70% of the world crops can grow here. So imagine how vibrant for you can be to be able to make a G-nut sauce, right, with food that it tastes like home, with ingredients that are actually really, really fresh. Those are the things that get me really excited about being here in Ontario, cooking food that I can also feel at home. Before we go on the next questions, I'm gonna get this cauliflower inside the oven. Again, simple cauliflower. Again, I've mentioned that I love to maintain the petals of the flower because I wanna really minimize the amount of food waste. A little bit of oil all over the cauliflower.
You have a special method to do the oil?
A special method to do the oil? Yes, like this.
It looks romantic.
It looks romantic. Okay, and then we have like generous amount of ras al hanout, generous amount of za'atar. This is one of my favorite spices. There is a friend of mine that owns a restaurant right here called Artisanal. He's a fantastic, fantastic chef. He does a farm French country cooking, but now he's been really adding a lot of his Palestinian food, and this it's really a homage to him as well. So here's our cauliflower. We're gonna add a little bit of a salt. Our oven, it's already preheated at 425 degrees. I'm gonna put in the oven, wash my hands, but I'm really ready for any further questions. Go ahead.
Okay. So I realize that you frequent the farmers market quite a bit.
Yes.
What are the intangible things that you are looking for when you, about the food and in the food when you go there to seek them out?
Yeah, to me, it's always been connecting with those farmers. No one really understands the tribulations a lot of farmers experience. I had a farmer that used to grow Christmas trees, evergreen, and a couple years ago, we didn't really have much of a water, so he lost all his evergreen. So just one simple change of a season can really change and affect and impact the livelihood of a farmer. You know, I had so many farmers that they tell me, you know, there are a lot of variables within the food cost that many consumers don't really know. So oftentimes when I'm buying an apple for 75 cents, technically that apple should cost me over $2 because there are really a lot of variable costs that we as a consumer, we don't pay. The cost of a wastage water, the cost of the transportation, the impact of a pollution, the impact of our health. So those are a lot of those invisible costs that we have in our own food system that we don't really understand. So having an opportunity to really connect with those farmers, listening to their daily experiences, I think it's a gift for all of us and something that everyone should be doing. You know, for yourself, Abdul-Rahim, based on your research, trying to connect farmers to technology. Imagine how empowering it is for farmers who are like perhaps in rural areas, right? Can you tell me a little bit more about the connection between this experience of my farmers here in Ontario and some of the tribulation of your farmers, perhaps in rural Ghana?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, I research into the use of technology for farmers, and of course, it's based on my own experience, like growing up as a son of a peasant farmer from northern Ghana, right? So, like seeing the kind of challenges with changing climate, with lack of access to markets, and then lack of access to, finances for like farmers in rural areas, it's been like same issue over the years, and as the climate is changing, things are becoming worse for farmers. So what I do mostly is trying to understand how can we actually leverage technologies to help alleviate some of the challenges those farmers are actually facing. And what farmers go through here is almost like, of course, that's on a different scale. It's almost the same as what like the smallholder farmers down in like Africa or even in the Caribbean, because some of the food that we eat here actually come from them. Yeah. But for most part, people don't really understand what like the food actually goes through before it gets to Canada here, right? There are a lot of challenges those farmers face, and it's good that through some of these avenues we're able to bring to light some of the issues.
Absolutely. Very, very exciting project. Let me reduce the heat down for a second. And now I'm just going to show you our couscous. So the couscous had the chance to steep. Right? So we added the water. Now it had a chance to steep. And all I want to do right now is kind of like fluff up the couscous, right? I want to gently remove those grains. Okay. I'm going to add a little bit more salt. We have our green onions. We have our parsley, pistachios. Absolutely. We have our currants. And we're just going to give a little bit of a mix. You know, the thing about couscous from household to household in many North African countries vary. So those are some of the ingredients that have been exposed. So earlier I was talking about lemons and being able to use every single part of it. Nowadays, cost of food has increased to 3%. So this lemon technically can cost me $1. Yeah. So if $1 costs me the lemon and I just juice the lemon and I get a 15 ml, how much does this 1 tablespoon of lemon cost? $1. So I want to be able to use every single part. So I'm going to use the zest. So now my dollar stretches a little bit.
I would not have thought of that.
Well, many of us don't really think about that because I feel that it's like a loss of a generational education. Last night we had a wonderful conversation about like people that are away from the kitchens. They're not cooking at home. Right? So when you're not at home and there is no one who gives you that home economics, you really, really lose an opportunity to understand how precious food actually is. So when you're thinking, teaching to a lot of my students, I tell them, if you don't think that environmental issues are important to you and all you think and care is your bottom line, this is a perfect example of your bottom line, right? Because now you understand the simple cost of a 1 lemon. Now, if now I use and squeeze the lemon, and I get all the juice, what can I do with the pulp? Should I throw it in the compost, or there's something else that I can do with it?
You can put it in water.
Exactly. So I can put it in the food processor, a little bit of water, a little bit of a honey puree, and then squeeze, and I get like this refreshing water lemonade, right?
Yeah.
So the single dollar now, I'm able to do a drink for us. We're gonna celebrate it, and we are not gonna spike it, don't worry about it. And then we're able to use the zest as well, okay? So those are some of the tips that I always encourage people prior of wasting food. So I'm gonna put it right here. Okay, I'm gonna move the bowl in the back. Top it up a little bit more with some more parsley, some extra currants, extra pistachio. Give it a little clean up right here, and just keep it here for a second. All right, our tagine. Let's see what it looks like and smells like. It looks good. Now let's see what it really tastes like.
It reminds me of a meal that we have in Grenada called fish broth.
Fish broth.
Yeah, we would put the fish and simmer it like that.
It smells good. It's almost there. We're gonna put it back on the going. And how is that fish stew made? The fish.
So usually you would fry the fish first, and
Yeah.
then you would make that gravy, and then put the fish into it. Like
Ah.
you have put the king mushrooms.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So, couscous is made. Mushroom tagine are getting done. Cauliflower is inside the oven. Let's make our tahini sauce right now. Okay. Again, for the tahini, I have a toasted
Sesame seeds.
sesame seeds pureed with oil. Okay. We're gonna add some garlic. There we go. We're gonna add the lemon juice. Maybe a touch more water.
Water from Ontario.
Water from Ontario, yes. Okay, maybe a pinch of salt. Let's just go. Let's taste it again. Delicious, just a little bit more water. There we go.
Well, thank you so much for putting your heart into this.
I'm putting my heart into it, you know. I know that you've done a little bit of a research around me and you were wondering if this guy can really cook. So today I really have to prove you that I can really
You
cook.
can cook. You
I can cook. Thank you. There you go. So, tahini sauce is made. Let's downsize it right here. There we go. Beautiful. Creamy, velvety, tons of flavor. Okay, let's keep this here in the back for a second. Okay, so our tahini sauce is right here. Let's move a few things away and get ourselves nice and comfortable to really celebrate this food. Go. I don't know about you, but I'm getting really hungry and excited about this. So
Me too.
let's get ready for it.
Lunch.
Yeah, and you just mentioned like celebrate the food, and of course when we are celebrating the food, we're talking about those who actually produce the food as well. And from my own research and prior to what you mentioned about the farmers market, there seems to be some disconnect between like consumers and producers, and part of it is actually lack of trust. So I'm wondering from your own work, like what role do you think chefs like yourself can actually play in terms of bridging that gap and bringing trust back into the food system?
Yeah, you know, trust, it's a very complex word to use between in a capitalistic world. You know, we are define our way of living based on capitalism. So, you know, it is, I feel almost it's like an oxymoron to use the sustainability trust and capitalism in the same place. We constantly have to lie to our consumers in order for them to be driven to our place. The element of a sustainability in a world that is a capitalistic cannot really be met. But I feel that we have a responsibility in advocacy to engage in consumer to be more aware and understanding. We have to have more policy that really support the farmers and the consumers, pretty much every single stakeholder, to understand that those conversations around environmental justice are real. But we cannot talk about environmental justice, we cannot talk about food justice, unless we talk about racial justice. We have to really understand that the Black, Indigenous, and people of color here in Southern Ontario and across Canada and the States as well really are the people at the bottom of the food system. And the food that have access to it is not necessarily the healthiest food. So how do we develop trust? And we have to come up with policies that really support the consumer in being able to access food. Food is only good and healthy if you can actually afford it. If you cannot afford it, then there is no good food out there for you, right? So when we really think about over 450,000 people a day relying on food banks in Toronto, over 4 million people in Canada are they are food insecure. So we really have to ask ourselves, what are the policies out there that supports Canadians to being able to have access to food? So give me a second and let me take a look at that cauliflower because I can smell it, but I want to make sure that we can enjoy it. Oh my goodness. Look at this beauty. Let's turn it around. Let's get in some color. Okay. Back in the oven for just like...
Smells so good.
Smells good? I'm sure it's going to be lovely. So just back in the oven for another 3 or 4 minutes. Okay. Your lunch.
Yep.
Okay, so I believe...
So you spoke a little bit about relationships, and then in my own research, I realized that there must be mutual beneficial relationships in order, to have that level of trust that Rahim spoke to earlier on. Tell me about your engagement in the farmers market with those who are producing the foods that you're using, and what is the impact of you using their foods, and also in the community as well? Were you able to measure that?
Yeah, there's a definite way for me to be able to measure, and when we have to do like a qualitative research, it's difficult to be able to really understand a day in a farm. For me, buying local ingredients not only makes sense because we support in the local economy, environmentally it makes more sound because we don't have to have food that is transported from far countries around the world. So from an environmental standpoint, from a financial standpoint, also makes sense. But also when we really have to think about our neighbors, many of those farmers. But again, for me, when I'm thinking about supporting local and supporting farmers, I have to pose another question as well. Who are those farmers? What kind of agroecological farming systems that they use? And who are the pickers that they use? And what's their lively condition? So for myself, as a Black person, as a racialized person, I cannot just think about the food at its own matter. I cannot just think about the farmer. Because Bob's experience is different from Abdul-Rahman's experience. Bob might have a lot of migrant workers. They might come from different parts of Central and South America. So for me, I cannot disconnect the food that I'm consuming from the bottom to the top. Supporting local, it's very, very important. Supporting farmers who are also considerate on supporting policies that actually help those migrant workers is just as important. And I think it should be more important. I think that consumers should know that whenever they're making particular choices with their dollar, they should really be thinking, who am I supporting?
Absolutely. Those intangible things.
Those intangible things, absolutely. Okay, so let's see what our mushroom tagine looks like. Okay. Smells lovely. I'm gonna put this one here for a second. I'm gonna taste it again, just to make sure. Can you do the shimmy? So good. Sorry. Okay.
Well, we do that when we're eating it.
So, mushroom tagine, our couscous is right here. We are pretty much ready to go. Okay. So let's plate some of this.
We are going to make some people really hungry if they're not cooking.
Give them our address. Okay, so. Okay, cauliflower is ready. Let's pour some of this beautiful tahini sauce into our plate. So this is our cauliflower with the tahini. Always. Spoon.
Flavor.
Flavor, yeah, you don't want to leave flavor behind. Okay. So this is one of the dishes. This is our roasted cauliflower. We're gonna also make it into a plate. I'm gonna take some of our couscous.
Plating is another very important skill.
Yeah, but food shouldn't be pretentious. Food should be like simple and beautiful and should make you feel whole when you eat it, If you're feeling bloated and tired and fatigued, that wasn't the right food. Okay, so now we have our mushroom. Some sauce. I know that you are salivating and anticipating this food, and you
Yes,
shall
I
be
am.
rewarded for your hard work today. This is so excited. Okay, this with this. You put this cauliflower as well. Here we go. So for those of you at home, you can see our mushroom tagine, our cauliflower, our couscous.
It's beautiful.
Okay.
All the colors.
This will be your lunch. Bon
Thank
appetit.
you. With thanks.
Yeah, so you just mentioned that those that are viewing at home, and we know that we live in a digital world right now.
Yes.
And much of my research actually looks into how we use digital technologies to help farmers. So I'm just wondering, you as a chef, how do you actually use the digital space in order to promote or encourage or bring people into your own space?
Yeah, I employed my 14-year-old daughter to teach me how to navigate it through Instagram and TikTok. She gives me all the time the wagging of the tail to say, no, you cannot say this, you cannot do that. Yeah, but I feel that nowadays it's so important to be able to really embrace technology, to really connect with a lot of consumers out there. But at the same time, also, many of my students that are in school, they're able to see and understand the things that are really important and I'm passionate about it. They join many of them in my personal causes as well. So I feel that the technology, it's here to stay. I think it's important to be able to use it, but it's also so important to be able to really disconnect from technology and just being able to be like together.
Well, talk about technology. We have some feedback from our audience. They said, Joel and Julie Lynn says, "Hi, we miss you, Bashir. Put you put your heart into everything. This is fantastic, and I hope it becomes an annual event. A recipe from Food Systems Advocacy."
Okay. Now, Joel is a friend of mine. He's a fantastic chef. He's working in an inn not too far from here. So much love to you as well, Joel and Julie. Thank you very much. That was so kind of them. Okay, so here are our 4 dishes. Just to kind of like recap what we have composed today for everyone. We have made it a fragrant couscous with pistachios and currants. Again, if you don't have at home pistachios, you can use the sunflower seeds, you can use the pumpkin seeds. If you don't have a currants, which is the poch cousin of a raisin, you can definitely use raisins. You can also chop dates if you have them and add them inside there. If you have a fresh mint, you can add the fresh mint as well. And any other vegetables that are inside your fridge, they're kind of looking like this. A bit tired, a bit fatigued, grate them, don't waste them, add them into these ones, and make sure that you can provide a lot of a flavor. My recipe is just a guidance for you to own food that is really important to you. Cauliflowers, we use in every single part of it. We're using the core, we're using the petals. We're using the petals primarily for 2 things. A, there is a more financial value to your buck. And B, we really want to minimize the amount of food waste. Tons and tons of food every year goes to just like the dumpster, you know? In this way, not only you eat in every single part of it, but there is a beautiful narrative behind cooking that is more important than just the food per se. We have made our mushroom tagine that had onions and garlic and saffron and ras al hanout and tomatoes. Again, you can substitute your mushrooms and add cauliflower in there. You can add pumpkin in there, anything you want to. Just allow it to slowly braise. If you are a meatitarian, you can add chicken, lamb, fish, or anything, or anything that you want to. And this is our final plate, which is very plant-forward. But at the same time, I wouldn't call it this plant-forward. I would call this like dope and delicious food that has vegetables inside. There is a stigma associated when people think about like vegetarian and vegan food, but I think like vegetarian and vegan food not only is here to stay, it's been here for thousands of years, and I feel that most people should really be encouraged to eating food that makes you feel home, that is like high in nutritional value, there's a lot of proteins as well, but at the same time, this is food that comes directly from the land, and it's not processed.
You can see yourself in the plate.
And I can see myself on the plate. Ooh, I love it. I love it. Love it. Any questions coming from the audience? I cannot read.
So we get a sense that food can be made and used as a tool to address big global problems. So, example, careful dietary choices can make ourselves and our planet healthier. What advice can you offer to make this potential real?
Do you mind answering
So
that? Because
you get a sense that we can use food to actually solve like complex problems in this time. What advice do you think you have for us in terms of using food as a medium to solve global problems?
yeah, I feel that food, this particular recipe, does not really answer to global problem. Those are conversations that we can have, and those are important conversations. So this is like spark that particular dialogue. But the truth of the matter, we have to look at into the power dynamics on who owns the land, who owns the water, who has the power to make particular decision making. So food, it's a wonderful way for us to narrate many of those inadequacies that we experience in around the world, but the food per se in this particular recipe is not going to be the answer to those world problems. I think we can have a further conversation, and as a community, we can really fight and advocate for policies that really force people to think a little bit deeper about how important food it is to us. So we think about food more as a subsidizing farmers, to be able to provide farmer enough money and enough support for them to be able to actually grow organic food for us. what are other alternative way of a farming system that we can have to feed a population of almost 9 billion people by 2050? So those are some of deep questions, but it's not my recipe that is going to answer to those problems, It's our collective voices as a community fighting, speaking with our MP. And oftentimes, I think people, they're intimidated of speaking about their rage, how appalling we have to feel. And rage is not a bad thing. When you're really angry because you want to fight for the food, for your own food, but your food for the next generation as well, it is very important to be angry and outraged, and then what are you going to do about it? So you collect the academics, you collect the advocates, and we fight, with our own means in order to ensure that our own food system can really thrive in a healthier way.
And we can also fellowship around our food, so we're going to do that afterwards.
Yes,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
I actually think, of course, just even using like a recipe or food to start the conversation is actually the first step towards solving some of those global challenges, because we can't solve the problems if we don't talk about them. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there's another question. I won't be able to read it.
Hi, Chef Bashir. It's such a pleasure to have you host today. Welcome. I was so interested to read that you were raised in Italy. As an Italian Canadian who was raised on my parents' Mediterranean, what is your favorite flavor fusion of Somalian Mediterranean food?
Absolutely. I grew up in Italy. I traveled over 20 different regions in Italy. And, I'm a bit biased because I grew up in Rome. So Roman food and food from the Lazio region are the ones that I love the most. But when it comes about fusion of food, I love a lot of the Sicilian recipes. And the reason I love those Sicilian recipes is because you really have like the impact of African food, like a lot of the Moorish food that has been settled for hundreds of years in the southern region. So I really love the flavor profile of incorporating like spices like cinnamon in a tomato sauce with raisin. So I'm not really sure who's my Italian-Canadian paisano, but I really love the southern regions of Italy where you have like a vibrant chilies, you have a warm spices like cinnamon and so forth added into those particular dishes, which not only they're like delicious, but it really makes me think about the contribution of African food in the diaspora as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we are almost running out of time. Let's have one more question. How do you eat this food? Do you eat it with a spoon or with your hand?
Oh. I want to give a little bit of a demo since we're here on how you consume this food. And Abdul-Rahim, you know and I know that we're going to be sharing actually the same plate together and consuming this food with our own hands. This is part of our own cultural narrative, and we put a little bit of a sauce right here. And you know, Abdul-Rahim, how we get down. Okay, so here's how we do it, okay? Your hands have to be clean. You're only using the tips of your palm, like right here, the tips of your fingers, and you just kind of like squeeze them together. So now your hands stays nice and clean. Bring them together, and then that's what you're looking for,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's what we're gonna be doing. So thank you all very much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed those recipes. I hope this conversation was as deep dish as we could have made it. I'm very grateful for not only your company, but also having guided me through this experience. I'm looking forward for more of this again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chef Bashir, for sharing all your thoughts. And it's a lovely meal we're all going to enjoy.
And if you are someone in our audience who listening in today, you can recreate these meals at home. The food recipes are actually available on the Ariel Food Institute website at www.arielfoodinstitute.ca.
And thank you for joining us.
And don't forget, this event is the first of our Deep Dish Dialogue series. So please stay tuned for details on the next session we'll be hosting in March. Thank you very much, and see you again.
Bye-bye.